Welcome guys to another episode of El Mejor Inglés, the show where we give you the best tips in order to, in this case, think in English. Because that's what we're talking about today. Today we're talking about a big step in your process of learning English, how to stay thinking in English. This is a really big step in your process. When people go, they're learning English, they eventually learn how to translate a little bit. And then they continue to translate in order to find the meanings of things that they read. Translating is not your best bet when you arrive to be an advanced English learner. Thinking in English is actually a more effective process, and it will allow you to make fewer mistakes and go faster in your advanced English learning. Let's say that you are in a conference and you're listening to an English speaker. You're listening to them, and then remember, you have to go back to work and you have to give the content of the conference to your subordinates. So you're the boss, they sent you over there, and now you're going to have to go back and teach them the things that you learned over there. So you're listening to everything in English. In order for you to understand, you're translating it into Spanish. Then your boss tells you to give it in English. And now you're going to have to translate everything back into English, probably with a bunch of mistakes, and you just did like 4 times the effort because you listened in English, translated to Spanish, replied in Spanish, and then translated it to English. So if you think about this process, this is a lot of effort when you're going from English to Spanish, to reply in Spanish, and then to reply in English. So your brain is doing this constantly if you keep thinking in Spanish. The first tip that you need to keep in mind is that this is a decision that you can make. Okay, so the first tip is you have to decide to think in English. I know that it sounds silly, but you have to sit down and you have to say, I will start thinking in English, and you have to keep that in your mind. Tip number 2 is that you have to create your English bubble, or what I like to call your English mode. You know, when someone talks to you really fast and you reply in English, and then they're like, why are you replying in English? Great. If that happens to you, that's great, because you were thinking in English and you were in English mode. You have to set a specific time or a specific place, maybe a part of your home where you can sit down and in this moment, in this specific day, specific time, you're only going to do things in English. You can surround yourself with music in English, movies in English, books in English. You can just make your little bubble. Tip number 3 is to avoid translators. Okay? Avoid having an English to Spanish or Spanish to English translator. Avoid using Google Translate or whatever translator you use. Avoid it, right? If you only use English to English dictionaries and you try to stay in English all of the time, this will create a stronger bubble. You will stay in English mode because you're not looking for that Spanish word. If there's a word that you don't know in English, go around the word. Don't just try to find the Spanish translation right away. Tip number 4, learn things in context and learn something that is useful and specific for you. If you want to learn about food, don't just read the list of food. This is not very relevant to your life. What you can do though, you can go online, go to your favorite restaurant's menu. If it's in English, like, well, I'm not going to mention any restaurants here, but you know, American restaurants. You go into the menu of this restaurant, look at the food that they have. Find out what this food is. You can look at the pictures. And then after you study these things in context, you can actually put them to use. If you apply these 4 different tips, then you will increase your vocabulary, and you will also stop thinking in Spanish and making your brain work so hard because you're just always overthinking things. Okay guys, so our expression for today is an eager beaver. Now, I'm pretty sure that you don't know what a beaver is because, you know, if you're a Spanish speaker, beaver, B-E-A-R. A beaver is actually an animal, and beavers are very proactive. So an eager beaver actually means that you're super excited to do something, or that you are super proactive and you're always super early to work, or you stay late, or you finish things before you have to. A beaver is always working, so if somebody tells you that you're an eager beaver, they're giving you a compliment, usually. So I encourage you to be an eager beaver when you're at your workplace. This way you will get a salary raise. All right, so be an eager beaver. To recap, remember the 4 tips that you can practice in order to keep thinking in English. First tip, it's a decision you can make. Just decide to do it. Number 2, all right, make your English bubble. Number 3, avoid translators. And number 4, learn things that are useful to you and specific, right? Something specific that you know you're going to need and that you can use so that it stays in your mind. Now, if you apply these 4 tips, you will be able to increase your processing ability for English. I know you're eager as a beaver to go try these 4 tips out. So I have a message for you. En Progressive English, nosotros aplicamos esta regla y tratamos de que ustedes piensen en inglés. Es algo que los profesores siempre tratan de reforzarles. Así que si usted conoce a alguien que necesita, o si usted necesita aprender el idioma inglés y mejorar, no hay una mejor escuela o mejor recomendación que Progressive English Services. Puede contactarlos al 809-732-5150 o visitar su website al pes.com.do o también el enlace que está aquí debajo en la información, haga clic ahí para llevarlo al website. Acuérdese que si usted menciona que nos vio aquí en el video, hay un 10% de descuento en suscripción. Remember to like this video, remember to subscribe somewhere here, and leave a comment if you have any questions. All right, always keep sharing these videos so that other people who care, like you, the fans, can also see this show. Thank you very much, and stay tuned for our next episode. I know that you're an eager beaver. So guys, I know you're eager as a beaver. All right, guys, I know you're eager as a beaver